Welcome to Haunting History, the podcast that reaches back into the past for the events that still haunt us today. Tales of true crime, mystery, and the macabre. And when we're lucky, the stories were history and the people who lived it and the paranormal meet. Now, who doesn't love a good ghost story, right? Welcome back to Haunting History Podcast. I'm your host, Kat.
And I'm Haley.
First, I want to give a shout out to our new Patreon, Jennifer. Hi now.
Hi, Jennifer. If you want to join Patreon, you can go to patreon.com, search for Haunting History Podcast. We have 3 different tiers: fan, listener, Stan, as little as $2 a month. So
I thought that we used the name Stan. Do you remember why I said that we need to use that?
No.
Because one of our listeners wrote in like a comment saying that he's our new Stan.
We need to come up with like a group name, like a team name. Team name isn't the correct thing, but you know what I mean?
No, I get it.
Like to call us.
I know. I've heard other podcasts call their listeners their weirdos, which I don't like that.
Maybe not, but
and then
we need one. So someone come up with something and message us, email us.
Yeah, because this author that I follow calls I want to say us because I follow her and I love her books, but she calls us her kittens. That I don't like that.
I don't think I like that one either.
No, so something cool. Think of something cool. And message Haley. Just tell Haley. She'll decide if she likes it or not. Because we'll just get in a big argument about it.
Probably.
I'll like one and you'll like another and blah, blah, blah. We all know how much I love old Hollywood, and you can't get much older than the Hollywood Roosevelt. Financed in part by the Roaring Twenties Kings and Queen of Hollywood, Louis B. Mayer, Douglas Fairbanks, the silent screen queen herself, Mary Pickford, and Sid Grauman of Grauman's Chinese Theater. The 12-story hotel has 300 guest rooms, including 63 suites. God, I want to stay there. It was built in 1927 and named for U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt. The hotel has penthouse views of the Hollywood Hills and the Hollywood sign. Do you remember what it looks like? I mean, it's been a long time.
No, and I've definitely never even seen the inside.
No, I'm intimidated to go inside.
Why?
It's very posh, and I always see it like influencers and stuff like hanging by the pool and all that stuff, and I feel like
it's not a place for you.
No, I just feel like I would look like tourist Sue walking through the hotel in my flip-flops, like
maybe
looking around for a ghost.
I feel like I hear more about the Beverly Hills Hotel than I do about the Roosevelt Hotel anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that people go there, like the influencers go to the Beverly Hills. Well, they've always done that, though.
I guess, but like, I don't know. The Roosevelt Hotel seems like it's something from decades ago. Well, like the Beverly Hills Hotel is more like happening now, is what I feel like.
Do you ever hear about the Chateau Marmont?
No.
You never hear about that either?
Mm-mm.
See, that was a big
thing, too. I avoid LA like the plague, so.
I know, see, and I love it. I always wished you would live there.
No.
It makes me sad.
It's so dirty.
But every time we drive down the street, you look at all the apartment buildings.
Oh, yeah, because like the idea of living in like city, I guess, is cool. But
or like West Hollywood, where it's like happening all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like when I turned 21, I had a friend that went to USC, and we would go down there and go out often. But it's not a place that I would make the trip down there.
But you probably haven't spent a lot of time in Beverly Hills, which is absolutely beautiful.
No.
But when you go to bars and stuff down there, was it one of your favorite bars down there? The one with all the locks or whatever, where you had to figure out how to get in. Did you do that or did someone else?
No, I didn't. We just went in downtown LA.
But you went to like a speakeasy type bar down there.
Yeah, once, I think. I don't remember.
And you just not your scene. So you belong in Nashville with me.
Mm.
You need to move to Tennessee. You're not a Hollywood girl. Built in Spanish colonial revival style, the hotel is designed in a T-shaped layout and has beautiful features of wrought iron balconies and arched windows. Building it took 1.5 years and at the time cost what seemed like an astronomical amount. That time, it was $2.5 million. Can you imagine what that is? Do you know what that is today?
I have no idea, but I would assume a lot.
Yeah, it's over 25 million. So to them, back in... Did you not act like 25 million is a lot of money?
No, it's a lot, but for a hotel, it makes sense.
Well, there's houses in the Hollywood Hills that cost more than 25 million.
Yeah.
So I guess in comparison, it doesn't seem like a lot. It's known for hosting the first Academy Awards on May 16th, 1929, which, by the way, you know how the Academy Awards goes on for hours and hours and hours?
Yeah.
Back then, the first one was only 15 minutes long.
That's an award show I could watch.
Yeah, no, they probably had the most fun because they just got the business out of the way and just had, well, it wasn't also televised or anything. No one else. I mean, people would stand outside to see the stars arrive, but beyond that, it wasn't like a big publicity thing that it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was held, the original Oscars was held in the famous and supposedly haunted Blossom Room. And I don't know if any of our listeners are I Love Lucy fans. You're not a big I Love Lucy fan.
No, I mean, I've seen it, but I don't watch it.
But you enjoyed it when you watched it with me, right?
Sure.
It's just a good show.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's old, but one of my favorite episodes was filmed at the Hollywood Roosevelt. It was the one where the Ricardos and the Mertzes came out to Hollywood for Ricky's studio contract. That whole episode is filmed at the Roosevelt Hotel and by the pool. In fact, so many shows have filmed there. Most recently, an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is your dad's favorite show. I wonder if you even noticed. The famous hotel has been the site of many parties, too, including the premiere party for the new Ghostbusters, the one with all the ladies.
Yeah.
And a season finale party for Game of Thrones, which would have been cool to go to. Not that I'm a Game of Thrones fan.
No, never seen it.
But it's still cool, the thought of it. I'll play I'll play the slot machine, Game of Thrones. Legend has it that Shirley Temple learned her famous stairway tap dance with Bill Bojangles Robinson at the Roosevelt, and Clark Gable and Carole Lombard, who is my personal favorite, used the Roosevelt, although there's some contention in regards to it, as their tri-stain place when Gable was still married. Marilyn Monroe is said to have filmed her first big photo shoot by the pool, and she lived at the hotel for 2 years when she was just a starlet. The list of stars to call the Roosevelt home goes on, including Charlie Chaplin, Errol Flynn, Francis Farmer, Will Rogers, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and the 1934 heavyweight boxing champion Max Baer. The hotel, the premier place to see and be seen in through the 30s and 40s, started to decline in the 1950s. The I Love Lucy episode was actually filmed in 1955, so it must have been after that it started to kind of go downhill. At one point, I know that they painted it, the different owners throughout the years tried to cover up the Art Deco design, thinking that it was dated instead of seeing that's what made it so special. And they even painted the outside a seafoam green at one point.
That's an awful color.
Completely destroyed the hotel. In 1985, though, Radisson Hotels purchased the building. It invested $35 million to restore the hotel back to its original. Some say that the restoration is what brought out the ghost, though. They say that.
Yeah, disturbing it.
Yeah, changing a building is what can manifest hauntings and things. And so a lot of people say that the 1980s is when this all started. The Hollywood Roosevelt is not one of the places that embraces their ghostly guest. There are plenty of people that do consider it the most haunted building in Hollywood. The resident ghosts include Marilyn Monroe, who, by the way, is the busiest ghost in Hollywood. I mean, she's spotted basically everywhere, including her gravesite, which I'll never believe. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to believe that. If you're going to haunt something, it's not going to be your gravesite.
Mm-hmm.
The most significant story about Marilyn haunting the Roosevelt was when a member of the housekeeping staff spotted her reflection in a mirror that had once hung in her room. And what they did was they took one of the mirrors that was in Marilyn's room when she lived there, which I don't know how they know exactly which mirror it is after so many years and so many people moving things around. But they say that the mirror that was in her room was moved to the lobby. And then now they say that the hotel doesn't have the mirror up anymore because too many people were kind of going in and
making it a tourist attraction.
Right. And it's really technically, it's supposed to be a high-end hotel. Don't get me wrong, tourists stay there, but they would just have people come off the street and tour buses pull up outside to go look in the Marilyn mirror. So now they don't have it out anymore. People today often complain of a bugler on the 9th floor who they believe is Montgomery Clift practicing for his role in From Here to Eternity. His spirit has also been blamed for patting passersby on the shoulders, and the ghost of Carole Lombard has been seen floating around the upper floors. That's a full-body apparition I want to see.
I don't even know who that is.
Carole Lombard. She's by far my favorite old movie star. They say she was glamorous and one of the most beautiful women in the world, but spoke like a sailor. She cussed up a storm, which you just didn't do in those days, but she did, and she got away with it. And I think I don't know, something about her. Some people say that she's still roaming around looking for her one true love, Clark Gable. But not everyone is as famous. There's talk of 2 men who haunt the Blossom Room. One of the rumors is that one of them is someone who lost in the original Academy Awards, he didn't get an award or something, which seems a little far-fetched to me. And then there's a little girl that's seen throughout the hotel, which some people have given a name to, some people Haven't, so it doesn't make sense. There's no actual backstory to a little girl who died there. So I'm not certain if the little girl is a valid haunting or not, but it's probably one of the top things people talk about when they talk about the hauntings of the Roosevelt. Stay right where you are to hear more about the hauntings and legends of the Hollywood Roosevelt from Craig Owens of BizarreLosAngeles.com and the author of Haunted by History, Separating the Facts and Legends of 8 Historic Hotels and Inns in Southern California, right after some promos from our podcast friends.
A fascination with the unknown has led me to research countless unsolved murders and missing persons cases. These victims are often forgotten in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Nevertheless, they need their cases recognized in order to keep investigators working on it. These victims also deserve justice and peace in the afterlife. Here I will share them all with you, giving both the facts and the theories every Wednesday at 3:30 a.m. Check out The Great Unsolved for more information.
Hey y'all, I'm Kim.
And I'm Lark, and we host Kudzu Killers, Homicide, and Sweet Tea.
Each week we discuss the juicy details of real-life murders that happen in the southern U.S., sometimes with inappropriate laughter.
But we try to be nice. The stories may be old, cold, or recent, whatever we find that perks our interest.
We download a new episode every Tuesday. You can find us on all the major apps, as well as a few minor ones. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, all the rest.
Just drop on by our host page at buzzsprout.com and pick your favorite app to download us on, and be sure and listen.
And be sure to check our blog at kudzukillerspodcast.blogspot.com, where we have extra content that was just too much for our little show.
So y'all come on, sit down with us and have a big old glass of sweet tea and enjoy listening to us talk all things murder.
Bye now.
Bye, y'all.
Hey, Craig.
Hi. How are you?
How you doing? Good. Are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's Halloween.
Which is the best month of the year.
Yes. 2020 is a little weird, but as far as Halloween festivities go, but you know, a lot of us keep Halloween in our hearts year round, right?
Yeah, no matter what. It's just everybody joins us in October, so it makes it more fun.
Ah, well, that's good.
Okay, so about the Roosevelt Hotel. One of the biggest stories, which I find really ridiculous, is they say their most famous ghost is Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia.
At the Roosevelt? I've never heard that.
Oh, my gosh. It's in every single thing I research. They talk about Elizabeth Short being at the hotel, which, let's be honest, it's not that unreasonable to think that she had ever been there. I mean, they had a restaurant, they had a pool that was open, so it's not unbelievable to think that she had maybe been at the Roosevelt at some point, but to say that she's their most famous ghost seems insane to me.
Yeah, that's a relatively new claim, but you know something? They've been, Elizabeth Short's been getting around within the last 10 years. I mean, she's connected to the Cecil Hotel, and that's totally bogus.
Right.
She probably never set foot in there, but there's no documentation showing that. The only hotel that there is documentation, and that's where the ghost story of Elizabeth Short originated, was the Biltmore Hotel.
Well, that was the restaurant mostly because someone said they saw her there, right?
Well, I think with the Biltmore, it was like the last person that saw her alive dropped her off at the Biltmore.
Right.
And then he drove off, and I believe there were a few people that saw her actually enter the building and then maybe leave, like the doorman. But other than that, no one recalls that much, and a lot of it was just hearsay and speculation, and everyone was getting involved at that time in trying to solve the murder. You know, the press went to town. They went nuts, and the police couldn't get straight answers. And then you had a whole bunch of people calling in to the police detective bureau saying that they know who the killer was, or even worse, they were the killer. And so they had to run down every lead at that point. But the Elizabeth Short haunting the Roosevelt, that was definitely not the ghost story when the story started surfacing. And the story...
So that's a new one.
Yeah, the story started surfacing for the Hollywood Roosevelt around 1987, really. That's the first mention of it in the Los Angeles Times, believe it or not. And it was a very brief mention. I've got the article right in front of me, and it's like dated July 9th, 1987. And all it said was everlasting Monroe magic. Hundreds of fans gathered at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles, California this weekend, nearly 25 years after the death of Marilyn Monroe, to commemorate the life of the actress in an elaborate tribute that displayed souvenir mugs, film clips, and a lock of her hair. There's a quote from actress Suzanne Strasberg, who was one of Monroe's friends, who said, "If Marilyn were here tonight, and according to what I believe, she is here in spirit, I think she would say, 'I love all of this. Honest, that's the truth.'" So that was the first mention of that, and Marilyn Monroe was actually one of the first ghosts that, people were claiming haunted the Hollywood Roosevelt.
What about Clark Gable and Carole Lombard? Any truth to that story?
Not really, not in my opinion. I would say that they probably didn't secretly meet at the Roosevelt because it was so high profile. You would want to take a place that nobody really knows about, especially reporters and gossip columnists.
What about Montgomery Clift? He's the other big name that's associated with haunting the Hollywood Roosevelt.
Yes, he was one of the first. He was one of the first ghosts to be allegedly. People were saying he haunted it, and there is some documentation that might support at least his connection with the hotel. He stayed there while shooting From Here to Eternity, and I want to say this was around 1953. I'd have to look it up, but it was during production. And as the story goes, he stayed in room 928, and he was known to pace the halls and pace around the room and practice playing the trumpet because he played a soldier, or he played a military person in the film. I can't remember if he was a Marine or Army or whatever. A film historian would know that. But supposedly years later, Cliff died in 1966 in New York, I want to say. But years later in the 1980s, stories started to surface about trumpet noise coming from inside room 928. And that story, I want to say it started up around, again, 1987, 1988. And you don't really hear stories about that now. Given that the Roosevelt's kind of in denial that it's haunted, when the latest owners that bought the hotel. So a lot of the stories you hear these days are actually recycled stories, ghost stories from the late 1980s. But it was definitely used as a marketing hook when the hotel opened in 1985. It took a couple of years for it to start making the news. And there's this wonderful book called Hollywood Haunted. I kind of like it, even though I don't find it completely accurate from a paranormal research point of view. But it's written by Laurie Jacobson and Mark Wanamaker. And Laurie Jacobson, who did most of the research, she claimed that when the hotel was closed and under renovation, various people started seeing apparitions around the place or hearing the sound of ghostly children running up and down the halls in empty rooms. And apparently there was a housekeeper that was cleaning a mirror in, I believe, a room that they thought Marilyn Monroe was in. And she looked up and thought she saw a reflection of a blonde woman, shapely woman, whom she said was Marilyn Monroe. And so that started the whole ghost story of Marilyn Monroe haunting the Hollywood Roosevelt. And it's still probably the most discussed historically over the years, probably the most discussed paranormal claim from the hotel, at least until Elizabeth Short came along.
And then the other one, this is the one that drives me crazy. Well, first of all, I don't find it odd to imagine that a hotel is haunted, just because hotels have so many events, so many emotions. People live there, they eat there. You know what I mean? Like, just the walls probably retain a certain level of energy. So to think that a hotel is haunted is, and if you believe in things being haunted, to me a hotel would not be a far stretch, just because of all that goes into a hotel. But one of the claims that I read about often, which drives me crazy, is that Rudolph Valentino haunts the Hollywood Roosevelt, but he died before it was even built, right?
Oh, yeah. No, he died before it was even built. It opened in 1927. It was partially funded, I believe, by Douglas Fairbanks and some other people, because I want to say, I'm not terribly clear on the history. I'd have to look it up. And I do intend to do a thorough scrubbing of the history of that building at some point. But I believe it had run into financial problems, and so a few Hollywood stars, invested in it as a real estate venture. But Valentino wasn't there. Another story that has been told over the years, and this is one that drives me crazy. I kind of giggle every time I hear it. But one of the stories claims that the Blossom Room, which is where the Academy Awards were held, the very first Academy Awards, that there's a cold spot there. And I don't necessarily doubt the cold spot. It could be true. It could not be true. But the psychic impressions were that it was a dejected winner of the first Academy Awards. It's the spirit of whoever was nominated and lost the award, that they're still haunting that room waiting to receive their award. And, this, I'm going to cast shade on psychics who go and do this anyway, but psychics have a real history of making things up. And they just make things up based on what little information they know. And unfortunately, it gets picked up and used a lot. In this particular case, the very first Academy Awards, when it occurred at the Roosevelt, all of the winners and losers knew in advance, 3 months ahead of the award ceremony. 3 months. So it seems to be, it's let me just put it this way. It's extremely unlikely that a ghost of a loser would be haunting when he already knew he had lost, if that were theoretically possible. So I'm not doubting that there may be a cold spot there. There were a lot of events, like as you said, there were a lot of events that took place at that hotel. It wasn't just that one Academy Award. But people, psychics in particular, they don't know this stuff. And, the history is kind of sketchy. So a lot of the online histories in particular and the ones in books, they just kind of hit the main points, and a lot of the real stories are forgotten.
What about, have you heard about the little girl named Caroline that they say haunts the hotel?
Yes. The Caroline, I believe, is an invention of Peter James. He made up Jackie, the name. Jackie Torn, they were on the Queen Mary. There's absolutely no evidence, no shred of evidence that a child by that name lived or died there. And he actually made up, the death by drowning at that pool. So it's suffice it to believe to say that he probably made everything up about Caroline too. But that's not to say that there isn't a child ghost there. It's just that Peter James had a way of stamping his own personality, and he had this weird thing where he'd go from location to location, and he always identified children ghosts. That seemed to be his motif as a psychic. I mean, he did that at the Vogue Theater. He did that at the Comedy Store. He did that pretty much everywhere he went. He even did that, when they brought him out to investigate the Camarillo Mental Hospital in Camarillo, California. He comes in and immediately spots the energy of a child, So wherever he went, children followed.
So there's no truth in the story of the little girl then?
There have been people that claim that they've seen a little girl. It's just that the code name Caroline is probably false. And someone like myself, someone needs to go through and actually try to do a death search on the property to kind of dispel a lot of claims. or to actually prove some of the claims. But there's supposed to be multiple children. But there have been reports of people hearing a child. I think there might have been sightings of a child in the lobby a few times, not many. And one of the main paranormal claims has to do with phone receivers being removed off the cradle in the phones in empty rooms, and just things getting moved around a lot. That seems to be a common theme. And I actually had one woman contact me, and she told me a story about how she was at a wedding, and she was in a room getting ready. I think she was a bridesmaid or something, and something invisible in the bathroom just started tugging her hair to the point where it was painful, and then it suddenly just released, and she was fine. And I hear stories like that all the time where, things get moved around. People thought they saw a shadow. I believe there was supposed to be a shadow or menacing figure in the basement or boiler room area of the hotel. Over the years, the stories changed quite a bit, but the main ones that were retold over and over again were mostly Marilyn Monroe being seen in her mirror at the Hotel Roosevelt, Montgomery Clift playing his trumpet in and around room 928, and a ghost child named Caroline.
What about Errol Flynn? There's been stories about him.
Well, okay, Peter James said Errol Flynn haunted that place. There was another psychic who was, really dodgy reputation, but it was Kenny Kingston, the psychic of the stars. I don't know if you remember him. He had for a while in the 90s, he had a 1-800 psychic hotline. And he did a piece for LA Magazine where he was at Musso and Frank's, and he just started name dropping all the ghost stars that were in Musso and Frank's. But he also attributed a lot of these stars to the Hollywood Roosevelt as well, saying that that's where they all hang out and party. They eat at Musso and Frank's, the ghosts do. They eat and drink, and then they move over to the Roosevelt and cap off their night. So he was definitely saying Errol Flynn was at Musso and Frank's as well as the Hollywood Roosevelt. And then, of course, I really think Peter James just took that and used it for his own claims, because he claimed that he ran into the ghost of Errol Flynn there.
So the general consensus is that the Hollywood Roosevelt, just due to probably history and the thousands of people that have been in and out of there and the events that they've held there, is probably haunted. It just probably isn't haunted by the people they say it's haunted by.
I would say that it is haunted. It does have a very rich Hollywood history, and I think that's what the owners at the time in the 80s and into the 90s, they were using the old Hollywood marketing hook by just name dropping names, and people love that. I mean, a lot of tourists that come through the area, they want to connect with old Hollywood, and a lot of them were staying at the Roosevelt, and in some cases because it was haunted. And, there were a lot of Carole Lombard and Clark Gable fans. And, I mean, if you can get close to them in some way or fashion, and a lot of people believe Hans Holzer, a lot of people, might have believed Peter James too, but seriously, his claims left a lot to be desired. So, people were going there and wanting to make that connection. Is there a ghost celebrity haunting the Roosevelt? Maybe. I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to say yes either. There needs to be like a real serious investigation there where you actually can collect and document data that will either support some of the claims or not. And, but a lot of people that go there, they already have this preconceived idea that Marilyn's ghost is there. So they'll, anything weird that happens, they're going to attribute it to her.
Right. Did she really live there for 2 full years?
Did what?
Did she really live at the hotel for 2 full years, they say?
I would have to look it up. I mean, there are some Marilyn biographers that know everything. Marilyn is another one of those people, though, that people claim that she lived there, here and there, all over the place. I was able to kind of debunk the Marilyn ghost stories at her house in Brentwood, as well as the Hollywood Knickerbocker Hotel, which was kind of around the corner from the Roosevelt. The history of these buildings do not support the claims completely, and there just aren't any consistent paranormal claims that would make me to believe that these places are in fact haunted. Also, the people that were making the claims, their character wasn't terribly great to begin with.
Right.
But with the Roosevelt, yeah, she stayed there a bit. She was there quite a bit. She was at the Ambassador Hotel quite a bit, which is no longer standing. There were a couple of places, even in the 90s, that claimed that Marilyn Monroe stayed there and that her ghost haunts the place. And so I think a lot of people were jumping on the bandwagon, trying to get, Marilyn Monroe slept here. She was at the Roosevelt. I'm not going to deny that. She might have lived there for a brief period of time. A lot of stars did stay there for moments of time, periods of time. And the studios also had a way of bringing in potential stars when they signed them and bring them out to L.A. If they had high hopes for them, chances are they did place them in the Roosevelt until they could find a place for them, another place for them to live. So there's that. But, the studios and the stars, they moved around a lot.
Has there ever been a serious paranormal investigation of the hotel? I mean, I know that the current owners don't embrace their haunted history at all. They don't have anything to do with it and they don't encourage it. But over the years, has anyone done?
Not in my opinion. No, not in my opinion. I've heard of a lot. Most of them are just psychic walkthroughs. And to me, that doesn't really count. You want to have a controlled environment. You want to have someone really knowledgeable about the history of the building there, to fact check any psychic impressions if that were to take place. On a side note, about 10 years ago when I was doing my own Haunted by History book, I actually contacted the Hollywood Roosevelt and asked if I could do a real paranormal investigation as well as a photo shoot for the book. And they told me flat out that the owners, which is owned by a corporation out of New York City, that they're not crazy about talking about the ghosts. They often decline to give any information. But if I wanted to audition for them in New York, I could. And I thought, audition?
That's crazy.
Myself,
yeah, they
audition?
Just straight up told me no. I asked them if they had anyone that would talk to me about history or hauntings, and they straight up said no. Sorry, we're not interested.
Yes. Well, they like my photos. So, in some places that don't allow paranormal investigations, trust my integrity. They also love the photos that I take because I make their hotel look beautiful,
right,
and glamorous. But I wasn't going to go there to audition for them if they have a history of turning, such requests down. It just seemed like a waste of time. There are plenty of hotels, historic hotels with Hollywood history that are much more open and actually would love to actually be able to know the real truth behind their properties.
So we're going to stick with our general consensus that yes, the hotel is probably haunted, but no, probably not by Marilyn Monroe. Maybe Montgomery Clift. For whatever reason, the Montgomery Clift story. I mean, they said he was practicing for the movie From Here to Eternity, and he would have been using a bugle, and people have said that they've heard that. So I'm gonna be okay with the idea that Montgomery Clift, not necessarily an intelligent haunting, but maybe an imprint of him doing it over and over again. I'll stick with that, and I'll stick with the the whole cold spots and orbs, and they said that they have like phone calls to the operator that just drop off. I'll stick with all that, but I'm
in the children ghost, there's probably at least one child, although you know, Caroline is suspect. The name Caroline is suspect, but you know, if people want to go and test it on their own, they have to do it under the radar.
Right. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Sure.
Tell everyone how they can find you and how they can follow you.
Oh, yes. You can follow me on Bizarre Los Angeles. It's Bizarre_Los_Angeles on Instagram. You can go to my own website, which is bizarrela.com. And you can find me under Bizarre Los Angeles or my name, Craig Owens, on Facebook.
And then your book, talk about your book.
Oh, yeah. My book is Haunted by History, Volume 1, and it separates the facts and legends of 8 historic hotels in Southern California.
And you have an event coming up in October?
Yes. It's a virtual haunt and music fest at the Queen Mary. It takes place from October 29th through November 1st, 2020, and it's hosted by the darkzone.tv. And they have just about every paranormal celebrity out there on board for this special event, and they asked me, so I get to join them, which is great.
And it's only $19.99 for people to join virtually. It's safe. You can watch it from home.
Yes. It's not a live event where you can actually show up because the Queen Mary is still closed due to the COVID pandemic. But this, at least talking to the producer from the Dark Zone, this is a golden opportunity to actually do a serious investigation because you'll have complete control of the atmosphere, hopefully, and because it's an empty vessel. So I don't believe there's ever been a better opportunity to investigate the claims there. And of course, they brought me on board to kind of keep it real because I've been there, I've investigated it, but more importantly is I combed through the records and I know which people died there and which people didn't. And so I can kind of help focus and keep the investigation on track. It's going to be a great opportunity. It should be a lot of fun. There's going to be music guests. You know, there are some friends of mine that are part of the investigation, and I can speak to their character. They're great people, and they take it seriously. So I think this is going to be a good event, and hopefully they'll catch some stuff that either supports all of the stories of the Queen Mary being haunted, and maybe a few that pieces of data that might tear down some of the urban legends that have been told about it over the years.
Well, thanks so much for doing this to me, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again before Halloween and after.
Oh, I hope so.
Okay, we'll stay in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kathy. You're one of my favorites.
Same. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Whether it's haunted or not, the history and legends of the stately Hollywood Roosevelt live on, much like the famous people from the past whose stars grace the sidewalk right outside its doors. Thank you for listening to this episode of Haunting History Podcast. We love hearing from you, so be sure to follow and comment on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at Haunting History Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to all your favorites.
Visit our website at hauntinghistorypodcast.com for more information on each episode and links to our Patreon page and all our social media platforms.
Until next time, I'm Kat.
I'm Haley.
And remember, the living are far scarier than any ghost.